These beginnings the zealous Covenanted reformers left no means unassayed to promote, by protestations to the Parliament and petitions, and many reiterated addresses to the Queen Dowager, from whom they received many renewed fair promises, which she had never mind to keep, and wanted not the impudence, when challenged for breaking them, to declare, quote, "It becomes not subjects to burden their princes with promises further than it pleased them to keep the same," and at another time, quote, that she was bound to keep no faith to heretics, unquote, and again, quote, that principals must not be strictly bound to keep their promises, and that herself would make little conscience to take from all that sort their lives and inheritance, if she might do it with an honest excuse, unquote. Wherein she spoke not only the venom of her own heart, but the very soul and sense, principle and project of all Popish princes, whereby we may see what security we have for religion and liberty this day, though the most part make such a pretense a pillow to sleep on. But after many discoveries of this kind of the Queen's treachery, at length they would no more be bribed by promises, blinded by pretenses, or boasted by her proclamations, slandering their enterprise as if it pertained nothing to religion, from their endeavors to prosecute the same, but finding themselves compelled to take the sword of just defense against all that should pursue them for the matter of religion, they first signified unto her, quote, that they would notify to the King of France and all Christian princes that her cruel, unjust, and most tyrannical murder, intended against towns and multitudes, was and is the only cause of their revolt from their accustomed obedience, which they owned and promised to their sovereign, provided they might live in peace and liberty and enjoy Christ's gospel, without which they firmly purpose never to be subject to mortal men, and that better it were to expose their bodies to 1,000 deaths than to deny Christ, which thing not only do they, who commit open idolatry, but also all such as, seeing their brethren pursued for the cause of religion, and having no sufficient means to comfort and assist them, do nevertheless withdraw from them their dutiful support, unquote. And thereafter they published a declaration to the generation of Antichrist, the pestilent prelates, and their shavelings within Scotland, quote, that they should not be abused, thinking to escape just punishment, after that they, in their blind fury, had caused the blood of many to be shed. But if they proceeded in this their malicious cruelty, they should be dealt withal, wheresoever they should be apprehended as murderers and open enemies to God and to mankind, and that with the same measure they had measured and intended to measure to others, it should be measured to them. That is, they should, with all force and power they had, execute just vengeance and punishment upon them, yea, begin that same war which God commandeth Israel to execute against the Canaanites, that is, contract of peace should never be made till they desist from their open idolatry and cruel persecution of God's children, unquote. I rehearse this declaration the more expressly, because in our day declarations of this style and strain, and aiming at the same scope, are hideously hissed and howled at as unheard-of novelties. Finally, when by all their letters, warnings, admonitions, and protestations they could obtain no redress, but rather an increase of insupportable violence, they proponed the question in a general meeting, quote, whether she, whose pretenses threaten the bondage of the whole commonwealth, ought to be suffered so tyrannical to domineer over them, unquote. Unto which the ministers, being required to give their judgment, answered that she ought not, and accordingly they declared her deposed from all government over them, quote, because of her persecuting the professors of the true religion, and oppressing the liberties of the true lieges, never being called nor convinced of any crime, because of her intrusion of magistrates against all order of election, because of her bringing in strangers to suppress the liberty of the country, and placing them in greatest offices of credit, because of her altering and subverting the old laws of the realm, unquote, etc. Which I mention because hence we may see what things our fathers judged did dissolve the relation between the people and their rulers, and, when applied to our case, will justify their reasons that they have renounced the present tyranny. This was done at Edinburgh in the year 1559, And thereafter, while they vindicated themselves, and went on with the work of reformation, throwing down all monuments of idolatry, and propagating the reformed religion, God so blessed their endeavors that their confession of faith and all articles of the Protestant religion was read and ratified by the 3 Estates of Parliament at Edinburgh, July 1560. And the same year the Book of Discipline, containing the form and order of presbyterial government, was subscribed by a great part of the nobility. Thus, through the wisdom and power of God alone, even by the weakness of very mean instruments, against the rage and fury of the devil, and of all the powers of hell, was this work of reformation advanced and effectuated, and came to the establishment of a law which did not only ratify and confirm the Protestant religion, but abolish anti-Christian popery, and appoint punishment for the professors and promoters thereof, which law often confirmed and ratified afterwards, that it be now cested and rescinded by the prerogative of the present tyrant, because it annuls and invalidates his pretense of succession, his pretense to succession in the government, it being expressly enacted afterwards by the Parliament at Edinburgh 1567, confirming this, that all princes and kings hereafter, before their coronation, shall take oath to maintain the true religion then professed, and suppress all things contrary to it, yet is still in force in the hearts of all honest men, that will not prostitute religion, law, and liberty to the lusts of tyrants, and will be accounted a better bottom to build the hope of enjoying religion upon, than the perfidious promises of a popish usurper, pretending a liberty to dissenting Protestants by taking away the penal statutes, the legal bulwark against popery, all which yet, to the reproach of all Protestants, some are applauding and congratulating in this time by their addresses and petitions to this destroyer of law and religion. I wish they would look back to see what the building of this bulwark cost our fathers before they fell it at such a rate, and compare the present addresses, courting and caressing the papists, with the addresses of these worthy builders of what they are destroying. There is one dated Edinburgh, May 27, 1561, presented to the council, showing that honestly craved them to make the secrets of their heart patent, which was, quote, that before ever these tyrants and dumb dogs empire over them, professing Christ Jesus within this realm, they were fully determined to hazard life and whatsoever they had received of God in temporal things, and let these enemies of God assure themselves that if their council put not order unto them, that they should shortly take such order that they shall neither be able to do what they list, neither yet to live upon the sweat of the brows of such as are no debtors to them, unquote. And when the mischievous Mary, the daughter of the degraded queen, returning from France, set up the mass, but in her own family, the godly at that time gave plain signification that they could not abide that, quote, the land which God hath purged from idolatry should in their eyes be polluted again. Shall that idol, say they, be suffered again to take place within this realm? It shall not, unquote. The idolatrous priest should die the death according to God's law, and a proclamation being issued to protect the queen's domestic servants that were papists, there was a protestation given forth presently, quote, that if any of her servants should commit idolatry, say mass, participate therewith, or take the defense thereof, in that case this proclamation was not extended to them in that behalf, no more than if they commit murder, seeing the one is much more abominable in the sight of God than the other, but that it may be lawful to inflict upon them the pains contained in God's word against idolaters, wherever they may be apprehended without favor, unquote. The words of John Knox upon the following Sabbath may be added, quote, that one mass was more fearful unto him than if 10,000 armed enemies were landed in any part of the realm, of purpose to suppress the whole religion. For, said he, in our God there is strength to resist and confound multitudes, if we unfeignedly depend upon him. But when we join hands with idolatry, it is no doubt but both God's amiable presence and comfortable defense will leave us, and what shall then become of us? Unquote. Yea, when it was voted in the General Assembly whether they might take the Queen's Mass from her, many frankly affirmed, quote, that as the Mass is abominable, so it is just and right that it should be suppressed, and that in doing so men do no more hurt to the Queen's majesty than they that should be by force take from her a poisoned cup when she was going to drink it." Unquote. Thus we have some specimen of the zeal of our fathers against idolatry, but in a little time court favors blunted it in many. And then had the servants of God a double battle, fighting on the one hand against idolatry and the rest of the abominations maintained by the court, and upon the other hand against the unfaithfulness of false brethren and treachery of sycophants, who informed the court against the ministers for their free and faithful preaching and warnings on all occasions. Yet they sustained the brunt of all these assaults and came off with honor. At length, to be short, in process of time, this Mary, a woman of a proud and crafty wit, and an abjured heart against God and his truth, insisted in the same steps of tyranny and treachery, but with greater aggravations, than her mother walked in, and was severed according to her desert. For after that her darling David Rizzio, the Italian fiddler, whom most men then supposed and still do suspect to be the father of King James, this man's grandfather, and some do not think it not unlikely that his successors have derived from this stock the Italian complexion and constitution, both of body and mind, spare and swarthy, cruel and crafty, received his due rewards in her presence by the king's consent and counsel. She conceived such contempt of and indignation against the poor uxorious young king, Henry of Darnley, that she never rested till she and Bothwell contrived and executed his murder, and then she married that murdering adulterer, the said Earl of Bothwell, whereupon the Protestant noblemen pursuing the murder took her and sent her prisoner to Lochleven, where they made her resign the government to her son James, then an infant, and afterwards she was beheaded by Elizabeth, Queen of England. We see now by this deduction what was the testimony of this period, and how in many things it confirms the heads of the present sufferings, which we may particularly remark. First, the Reformation of Scotland had this common with all other Protestant churches, that it was carried on by resisting the opposing powers, but it had this peculiar advantage above all, that at once and from the beginning both doctrine and worship, discipline and government were reformed. As Mr. Knox witnesseth, that there was no realm upon the face of the earth at that time that had religion in greater purity. Quote, "Yea," says he, "we must speak the truth, whomsoever we offend. There is no realm that hath the like purity for all others, how sincere soever the doctrine be. Retain in their churches and ministry thereof some footsteps of Antichrist and dregs of popery, but we, praise to God alone, have nothing in our churches that ever flowed from that man of sin." Unquote. The doctrine was purely reformed according to the rule of Christ, both as to the matter and manner of delivery. As to the matter of it, what it was, the Confession of Faith ratified in Parliament in the year 1560 doth witness. In the manner of it, they studied not the smooth and pawky prudence that is now so much applauded, for not observing which, such as would fain be honest in this duty are so much condemned. But they cried aloud against, and did not spare the sins of the time, with application to every degree of men, as we have it published and vindicated in Mr. Knox's history.